A Love Triangle. Chapter 3. We all met at the airport. I noticed that for a group going on vacation, we didn't seem particularly excited. I scanned the area looking for Will, not relaxing until we were in the air. Bonnie held my hand the whole way and chatted happily. Rhonda and Vicky grinned and held hands. Jason had fallen asleep, which seemed to annoy Annette. Booger and Jen were sitting a little further back, and she looked tense. She smiled at me when I looked at her, and I smiled back at her. Jules and John weren't even sitting together, and that didn't seem to bother them in the least. The resort was beautiful, the weather was perfect, the sand was white as snow, and the warm water was crystal blue. We each had our own little bungalow, arranged in a crescent along a small cove, and there was even a chain that could be strung across the entrance to ward off visitors. All the bungalows faced the beach, and when it rained or got too hot, you could sit out on the veranda. If it wasn't what we came for, I would have loved it. We all went to our rooms, and no sooner had the door slammed shut than Bonnie was already pouncing on me, more enthusiastic than she had been in weeks. Never one to look a gift horse in the mouth, I had a very pleasant interlude when I managed to hold back the thought that this was probably the last time I could enjoy being her one and only. Tomorrow she would be an accomplished woman. Toward noon, we built a fire on the beach and grilled. After the preparations were over, the girls, grinning, threw off their covers. All of them were topless. We were all mature, so most of the guys had some small gaps, a few wrinkles, and the beginnings of spare tires. But overall, we were all in decent shape. We admired the girls with approval, their sizes, shapes, even the slight difference in Annette's color. Bonnie teased us about their efforts, and Booger immediately pulled down his shorts to show off his speedometer. Out of all of us, he was in the worst shape of all, and personally, I thought he looked a little silly. He smirked, thinking he'd gotten an advantage, but his mouth dropped when Jason and I threw them off, revealing nothing underneath. I'd been in enough locker rooms to realize that my height was a little above average, but Jason was way above average, much taller. John and Booger had no choice but to drop theirs, and I noted with satisfaction that if I was above average, Booger was definitely below average. John was a little smaller than me. The girls kept up. After we were done ogling each other, we relaxed and had a good time. We were swimming, and I looked up and saw Vicky swimming next to me. I told her that I admired her personal floaties. She giggled and said that if you pulled on the buttons, they would get even bigger. Useful to know for an emergency, Vic. I can test that theory tomorrow night. I hope they do. Just remember that you have to pull them hard to make them inflate, and the bigger and harder you pull, the bigger they get. Rhonda got up, heard us, and giggled. I need to check this out, honey. She caressed and pulled hard, so hard it felt like she was going to blow out of the water. I spotted Jennifer alone, looking lost and lonely. I swam up behind her, dove underwater and grabbed her, lifting her out of the water like Moby Dick, and tossed her around while she screamed in surprise. She surfaced, choking, and I put my arms around her. Relax, Jen. What will happen, will happen. Until it does, you have the right to say no. Remember that. Jen smiled, probably for the first time since we got on the plane. I still can, but for you, I can make an exception. Rhonda, Vicky and I decided to split you up first, all three of us at once. Do you think you can handle that? Not a chance, but I want to try. In that case, I'm announcing a contest. They've both had you before, though that was over 2 decades ago. I was 10 when it happened. Good for you for making me feel old, Jen. She laughed when it was my turn to rise, sputtering with saliva. Tomorrow night. Me first. Promise me. I did, and she swam away. I was in a good mood until I saw Booger standing behind Bonnie. They were in water that reached her chest, and he was trying to pull her to him, and she was trying to pull away. I swam up to him, and he, seeing my gaze, backed away instantly, trying to start the celebrations a little early. She blushed with her whole body. If it had been up to Booger, we would have started as soon as we got to the beach. I told him no, and he kept brooding. I was just about to beat the shit out of him when he swam away. You do realize you don't have to sleep with every man here, right? Maybe just one will satisfy your desire. Bonnie didn't look me in the eye as she agreed, telling me everything I wanted to know. She was probably going to be with each of the men present if she could. Good mood gone, I climbed out of the water and busied myself with the huge grill that stood in a grove of trees near the beach. There was a cooking table and half a dozen picnic tables. Jen and Annette came over, both gorgeous. I marveled for a moment at the contrast in size and color. They grinned and turned their heads. They pulled a beer out of the fridge and sat down at the nearest picnic table. I'm a little pissed off grunt. I understand little miss wants to be first tomorrow night. You'd better save a seat for me, or I'll be disappointed. I kissed Annette on the cheek and was surprised to see that she was blushing. I hope she remembered the good old days. I'll sleep all day tomorrow to conserve my strength. Looks like I'm going to need it. Take your vitamins. I want you to be in great shape. Jules and John came over. I remembered again how well she had aged. She'd been single most of her adult life, though, and couldn't afford to relax. She looked around and grinned. What were you guys talking about? Jen looked up in surprise, a smirk appearing on her face. Oh, this and that. Sometimes there were difficult topics, but mostly we just talked about anything that came up. She was staring at my junk. Already satisfied that he was surrounded by so many desirable women, he decided to lighten the mood. This caused quite a stir, and Jules got a cup of ice water from one of the coolers. There were bursts of laughter as they watched me dance and gasp. Tomorrow, baby, tomorrow. We grilled and chatted about mundane things, relaxing to the point where we almost forgot we were in this situation. When the meal was over, the girls were brought wine, and I chose one of the local beers, surprised at how good it was. It was much stronger than I was used to, so I tried to keep my cool. There was a lot of giggling. The girls put on some music and had an impromptu hula line. The moon was full and it rose over the island, giving the white sands a surreal glow. To this day, I still see it as if it were real. One of the most sensual and beautiful spectacles I've ever witnessed. The music changed, and they started pushing and rubbing against each other until they were a ball of cum. I heard a few gasps and saw Rhonda smirk, sensing that she'd gotten more than her fair share. I wondered if Bonnie was thinking about switching teams tomorrow, just for the experience. From the way she and Vicky were rubbing up against each other, she was thinking about it. By now, we were all in a pretty good mood, and the girls separated, walking over to their partners and pulling them in different directions along the beach. Come on, Jimmy, Bonnie said, pulling me by the arm. I've always wanted to spend an evening on a moonlit beach. It must have been planned, because blankets were prepared. We were separated, but still within sight of most couples. The full moon didn't allow us to see much, but you could hear the sounds of passion echoing around the cove. At the end, Bonnie saddled me in reverse cowboy style, which she never favored for the finish line. I think she did it to watch the other couples. I felt eyes on me and looked around. Jen was sitting cross-legged at the edge of the trees, digging her fingers deep into the ground and watching. Apparently Booger had worked fast and left her unsatisfied. She saw me watching and grinned. I remember thinking that seemed odd to me. I don't think anyone would have paid attention. I have never felt as connected to my wife as I did in that moment. All the couples gradually unhooked and left, some saying goodnight to each other softly. Bonnie took my hand, and we stepped into the warm water, letting the warm ocean water engulf us. We walked into our bungalow and collapsed on the bed, almost exhausted. I woke up before dawn and immediately tensed up. Today was the day. After this night, nothing would ever be the same again. Bonnie rose a little muffled. I heard the shower running and was about to join her when I suddenly found the door locked. In all the years we'd been together, I couldn't recall ever having a door locked in our house. This served as my cue. She didn't want me to touch it today. I think I shocked her to death when I asked her why the door was locked. She dried herself with a towel, wrapping one around her waist as she vigorously dried her hair. Was it locked? I don't remember locking it. She said this as the towel covered her face. I realized she was lying, but it was useless to insist. We don't have to do this, you know. We can just stay in our little hut and let the world pass us by. She only hummed, still hiding behind the towel. We've already decided everything. Just one night, sweetheart, and then I'll be yours forever. I had a flicker of a thought to remind her that this was exactly what she'd promised me at our wedding, but it didn't work. Bonnie, look me in the eyes, damn it! Her head came up, her eyes widening. I want you to remember this moment years from now, and remember that I offered you a way out, and you refused to take it. You know as well as I do that after this night, our relationship will never be the same. Never. It will always be in the background in all of our future endeavors. I agreed, and I'll keep my word. But you need to think about what it's going to take. That's all I'm saying. I got out, past the gate, and walked down the road to the main part of the resort. I had planned to make a nice breakfast, but you know what? Screw her. I found a cute little cafe and ordered the island specialty. Soon there was a large plate of local fruit, followed by scrambled eggs cooked with spices I'd never heard of, with 2 cheeses I'd never tasted, and fried mushrooms on the side. Despite my state of mind, it was a very good breakfast. I was almost done when Jen and Booger showed up and sat down at the table. Looking forward to tonight? Damn straight looking forward to it. I looked at him, trying not to give away my disgust. Actually, no, and I don't want to talk about it. Come on, boy, don't be like that. Just think, while Bonnie gets hers, you'll be spending the evening with that hot little box. She's got skills, man. Jen was crimson with embarrassment. I was already starting to freak out, and it wasn't helping one bit. You know what, Reginald? You should kiss her ass every day because you were lucky enough to talk her into marrying you. Do you really think it's gonna work out? She'll be with real men for a change. Going through that and then coming back to you is gonna be really hard. A normal man would be disgusted by the whole thing. But when it's over and you're back with her, the thought that she could be with other men will consume you. Where does it stop? You don't expect it to be once and for all, do you? As much as he hated being called Booger, he hated being called Reginald even more. I took Jen's hand across the table. I'm really sorry, Jen. I bet from now on every time he's with you, all you'll think about is how a real man does it. You're not just, as he put it, a hot box. You have a good heart and a good mind that happen to be wrapped in a very attractive body. Be a little careful what you choose, hubby number 2. And if you need anything when we get back, come to me. Understood? Booger snapped back. Fuck you. I think I'll get on Bonnie too. What do you think of that? I had to take a deep breath to clear the red fog of rage from my vision. I prided myself on controlling myself as I answered. I think what Bonnie does tonight is up to her. She's never been inclined to do it. But then again, I never thought she'd be doing it with idiots, so who can say? One thing I promise you, when we get back, if I hear you bragging, I will destroy you. I don't mean financial or personal gain. I mean you'll be part of the foundation of one of my new construction projects. Look me in the eye and tell me you believe me. He turned slightly pale, and Jen thought she might faint before she recovered enough to speak. What happens on the island will stay on the island. You have my word. Thank you, Jen. I believe you. It's that nasty creep you're married to that worries me. I hope he has a big insurance policy, honey. You might need it. I was suddenly very tired of the whole situation. The more I thought about it, the less it made sense. Bonnie had been happy with me for 26 years, and I couldn't understand how her attitude had changed. Something wasn't adding up. I left them and walked through the local market, listening to the sounds, smiling at the children who were helping their parents in their stalls. One little girl was determined to sell me something and almost chased me when I tried to leave. It was a jewelry stall, mostly with shell necklaces of different colors and kinds. Some were dainty and elegant, others were big and bold. I thought they looked like me and were builders and crafters, Bonnie and I with houses and buildings, and they with shells, just people trying to make a living and improve their families. I bought one for both daughters and another for my daughter-in-law. There was another one, elegantly made so that the shells formed a flower. I knew Bonnie would love it, so I bought it, wondering if it would be the last gift of her life. I went back to our compound. Jen must have told them about our conversation, and they were hesitant and overly polite in dealing with me. This only added fuel to the fire of my simmering anger. I spoke to them in curt tones, and soon they left me alone, all but Jules. That would be the end of it for your marriage, wouldn't it? In all likelihood. I want honest answers, Jules. What the hell is going on? Why is she having a sudden fit of promiscuity, of determination, even if it ends for us? What could be in her head? Tears ran down her cheek. I don't know, honey. I really don't. I asked, but she refused to discuss it. She seems disconnected from everything. The only time I've seen her smile genuinely was when she was holding her newborn baby and the night of the incident in the hot tub. It's the first time in a while she hasn't shared it with me. We sat in mutual distress for a while before she got up, kissed me on the cheek, and left. As soon as she left, Jen, Vicky, and Rhonda showed up. Vicky looked at me and sighed. "You're not going to do that, are you?" "No, I just can't. I can't stay married either." "If so?" "So she's made her choice." 3 arms wrapped around me, and I felt the tears flowing. Jen pulled away. "I'm going to go through with this, just to show him how much better you guys are in comparison. I'll do it to hurt him, but he'll probably like it. Our clock is ticking, he just doesn't know it yet. Promise I'll see you again, Jimmy. I'll probably be in dire need of a hug by then. I'm not going to disappear. I may lose my marriage, but I won't lose everything I've worked for and the people I love. I'll be sure to give you a hug the next time I see you. Maybe even give you a little kiss." I grinned for the first time. Maybe a lot. Finally, something I can look forward to. Vicky and Rhonda giggled along with her, and the mood improved. Vicky just said what was on her mind. "I really don't know what to say, so I'll say what I want to say. This sucks. I've always liked Bonnie, and I refuse to pick sides. But if you suddenly become a free agent, you better set aside a weekend and get a prescription for those little blue pills. You're going to need them." They did a good job of maintaining my confidence, but eventually they ran out of words. It was past lunchtime, and I hadn't seen Bonnie since breakfast. I found her lying on the beach with Booger looming over her. He kept his distance, but as soon as he saw me, he practically ran down the beach. I crouched down next to her, admiring her body. Having 3 kids had taken its toll on her, but she wasn't flabby, and her stretch marks were minimal. She just rolled over, and I admired her taut ass, the result of 5 days of training with Jules. Finally, she spoke. "Where have you been?" "Don't think." You could hear the desperation in her voice. "Please don't lecture me. You agreed to this. This is going to happen. Is there anything you want to say?" "Actually, I have a few questions. Chief among them is why. Why now, after 2.5 decades of a fairly decent life? Please don't insult my intelligence by saying it's just a desire to experience a strange flavor. It must be much deeper than that, if you are willing to risk our marriage." She rolled over and sat up, just watching me for a few minutes. "I can't explain. You're the kindest and most loving person I've ever known. Lord knows you're far from perfect, but even after your missteps, I still loved you. Then, when we started remaking the shack, everything changed. Nothing seemed to matter. It got to the point where I felt like I had one of those 36-inch zippers hanging around my neck that the store has. At first it just hung there, but it seemed to get tighter and tighter every day. Then it became uncomfortable, and now it's choking me. I'm trying to find a way to cut it off before it kills me." I was so surprised that I couldn't answer for a minute. When I gathered my thoughts, I still didn't know exactly what to say. "Bonnie, you know I'm not really versed in this sort of thing, but it sounds like you're suffering from depression. You used to be a nurse. Didn't you notice the signs? We can help. You need to get a full workup. Maybe it's hormonal or something else. Let's go home and try to figure it out together. If we need counseling, if I've been abusive unintentionally or just indifferent to you, I can change." For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had hope. She shattered it rather quickly. "You can leave if you want, but I'm staying. I've made a commitment and I intend to see it through." In retrospect, I realized it looked like I was begging, and it was. Nothing is written in stone. Remember how we set things up? We have the option to back out at any time. Let's leave here and go somewhere else your heart desires, just us, and spend some time talking, adding some love. I'm willing to do anything to bring you back to what we were. You just don't understand, Grunt. I don't want to go back to the way things were. I'm tired of living in quiet despair. I'm hoping this will set something in motion so I can feel joy again." We didn't talk for a long time. Finally, I stood up and brushed the sand off my shorts. "Well, I did the best I could. I hope you enjoy tonight, Bonnie. I won't be here to find out. I'll exercise my right to opt out. I'll see you at home." She grabbed my hand. "Please, Jimmy, stay. I'll feel calmer knowing you're here. You'll have fun. I know you will. We'll come home refreshed. Maybe I'll do as you ask, see if anything physical has happened to me. We'll feel better, you'll see." I look into your eyes, and I can see that you don't believe what you're saying any more than I do. I'm sorry, sweetheart. You have no idea how sorry I am, but I won't take it anymore. I'd appreciate it if you'd leave me alone for a few minutes to pack my things. She just sat there, fat tears slowly streaming down her face, but she didn't disturb me. I wondered if this was the last time I'd see her. I gathered my things, noticing the stockings and garter belt she had spread out on the bed. It looked like that was her entire outfit for the holiday. Contacting the resort office, I booked a cab to the airport and received confirmation that it would be there in 30 minutes, and that a flight was now arriving and would be ready to leave in just over 2 hours if I wanted a seat. They would be happy to arrange it for me. I walked out to the cab, looking back once more at the beauty of the place. Under different circumstances, I would have loved this place. There were a few people from our group on the beach, and they called out to me. I just waved, noting that none of them were my wife, and got into the cab. I arrived early enough to get a ticket and sat down to wait. 20 minutes later, a woman came up to us and called my name. My heart raced, and I thought Bonnie had come to her senses, but when I turned around, it was Jen. There were tears in her eyes as she hugged me. "Will you help me get a ticket?" I bought one, glad that things were much calmer here. We sat there without saying anything. 20 minutes before boarding, Jen needed to use the women's restroom, and I went next to her, figuring it was better to go there than to experience the claustrophobic feeling that comes with airplane restrooms. It was like the sun through a magnifying glass focused on dry paper. I just exploded. Will was standing at the urinal. He was bragging to the guy next to him. "Yeah, me and my girl set it up in here, but one of the husbands turned out to be an asshole and insisted I not come. We'll slip in here after dark, and he won't know anything until it's over. I'm gonna love the look on his face when he sees me in the morning. Look, if you want to come with or without your wife, we've rented all the bungalows on Half Moon Bay. Come on over." The man looked visibly uncomfortable. His eyes widened when he saw what must have been murder in my eyes and stepped back. I grabbed Will's shoulder and yanked him to me. He was still holding his buddy when I hit him as hard as I could. The blow landed on his ear and it exploded with a stream of blood. He fell without a sound, though he did let out a couple shrill gasps when I kicked him hard in the balls. It was so hard that he sealed himself into the wall under the urinal. I'm surprised I didn't kill him, but at that point, I guess it wouldn't have mattered. The guy ran out of the bathroom and no one else was there. In a fit of inspiration, I yanked his wallet out of his pants, then pulled out my buddy, peed on his face, washed my hands, and walked out. I stopped and gave him another kick in the balls in case he didn't remember the first one. The last time I saw the asshole, he was lying under the urinal in a puddle of piss, holding his balls and trying to scream. I tossed my wallet right outside the door, hoping some enterprising islander would find it and put it to good use. Jen stood by her luggage with a puzzled expression on her face. "Some guy ran by looking like he saw a ghost. What happened out there?" "Some drunk was molesting in the stalls. He was so drunk he passed out under the urinal. Come on, it's time to board." Just before boarding the plane, I looked back and saw Grace's astonished eyes. She had left, probably to tell her Lothario husband that I had seen her. We didn't talk much on the way home, each of us undoubtedly thinking about the fact that their marriage was over. I gave her a ride home, and we finally started to deal with it. I asked her what she was going to do. "I don't know. I know I don't want to live with him now. Maybe this is the end for us. He's had some strange ideas since Will came back to town. Free advice. Until you're sure, protect yourself. Move your money around a little at a time. Cancel all co-branded cards. You can always put the money back and get new ones later. How did he take your leaving?" She grinned, amused for the first time in a while. "He threw a temper tantrum. Apparently he made promises to Will and John. I told him that if it was that important to him, he could stay with them." That's not the picture I want. I pulled into her driveway while she worked on her phone. "Asshole, the bastard. He's already closed the accounts. That was awfully fast. What am I going to do now? I don't have a dime, and I really don't want to be here when he comes back." "Well, you can ask your Uncle Jimmy for help. I hear he's partial to pretty young girls." "I can't ask you to do that. How would you explain that to Bonnie?" I think the tone of my voice said it all. I'm afraid the days of me having to explain anything to Bonnie are over. We both have personal checking accounts in addition to our joint accounts, and we both have separate business accounts. Besides, the old Bonnie would have thought I was an asshole if I didn't help a friend in need. Gather what you need while I go get my truck. If anything, we can put it in storage. I returned home, grabbed fresh clothes and papers from our safe. All of our work lines were routed to the house in case we received an after-hours call that required immediate attention. We kept the sound on to screen the calls. All the message banks were full. The phone rang when I was in our home office gathering papers needed for existing projects. There was silence. Then there was a snicker, and then Jules' annoyed voice broke out. "For God's sake, Bonnie, say something. Say something before it's too late." The line went dead. I didn't listen to the rest until much later. Jen packed up her things, and without further ado, I took her to one of our houses. The electricity was on for show, and I helped her set up the bed she had brought with her. That, a love seat, a TV, and some kitchen utensils were all she needed. She came to pick me up in her car. When everything was ready, I left. She asked me to stay, but I needed to be alone. I promised I would visit her soon, and she was to call if she needed anything. Jen hugged me gently and stroked my cheek before I left. "I'm sorry, Jimmy. I'm sorry we got into this mess to begin with." "Me too, Jen. From my last conversation with Bonnie, I realized that even if it wasn't this, it would be something. You don't need to feel guilty about me." Like Jenny, I wanted to get away from home and be away from everything. I called my foreman and told them I had an emergency and would be out of town for a couple weeks, but I would call every day or so and they could call me if the situation called for it or send me an email. I was taking my work laptop with me and almost nothing else. Last time I went to the beach, so I drove the other way, ending up in the mountains 2 states later. Stopping by the bank, I withdrew enough money to last me a long time and hit the road. I made sure to buy a cheap pay-as-you-go phone and left my top-of-the-line model lying broken to pieces in a desk drawer in my store. Then I thought about it, put it back together, and when I got 50 miles down the highway, I turned around, pulled into the first stop I could find, and stuck it under the bumper of a big car. I had no idea where it was going, but the girls could track it and wonder where the hell I was. On a whim, I stopped by a marina on a large lake that advertised houseboats for rent. It took a lot of talking and a little extra money, but I got them without a paper trail. True, they insisted I leave my credit card with them in case I damaged anything. The woman grinned sadly as she showed me how to operate the boat and everything on it. "I don't know why you want to leave, but I'm assuming there's a woman involved. None of my business, but are you sure this is the right path to take?" Sighing and wondering if it was so obvious, I told her that I was like an old wolf. When I get hurt, I go into seclusion to either recover or die. This will soon pass, and I will gather my wits to face my demons. In the meantime, the biggest task I want to accomplish is to try to find where the fish are biting. She gave me some tips and directed me up the road to a small independent grocery store for supplies. I drove past the farmer's market and stopped to buy some fresh vegetables before loading up on meat and sandwiches. I bought a 12-pack of my favorite beer, a couple of soft drinks, and was ready to go. The owners insisted I go through an hour-long briefing before setting off on my own. "It's a big lake, but it's not that big. Be careful, you're not the only one who doesn't know what they're doing. For the best fishing, head north to the mouth of the lake. There are lots of big bass and crappies there." Satisfied, they left, and I was left alone. The boat had a small 19-inch TV and a small satellite dish. "Keep an eye on the weather forecast. We often have thunderstorms this time of year. If you see one coming, run to the cove, anchor and wait it out. During a storm, stay out of the main channel. The water can get pretty rough." I've been fishing. I visited other marinas and ate at a wide variety of establishments. Most were good, a few were exceptional, and one probably served the worst food I had ever tasted. I anchored in the bay, went ashore, and wandered through the national park forest that made up most of the shoreline. When I turned in the boat and told them how I had spent a lot of time, they turned pale. "That part is a bear sanctuary. No one is supposed to be there. The females are nursing cubs right now. You're lucky you didn't get mauled." I grinned. Ignorance really is bliss sometimes. Well, that information would have been nice to have, say, when I rented the boat. "You haven't read any of the pamphlets we gave you, have you?" I stopped being smug. Perhaps I should have read the literature instead of shoving it in a drawer. I called every day and listened to my foreman berate me for being absent from the workplace. Everyone had a common theme. Bonnie's driving us all crazy, boss. Maybe you should call her so she doesn't get in our way. I'm sure we'd be more productive. I set my phone to private number status, alerting them in advance. That way they couldn't give her the number, which I was already sure of. The time had come. I was ready to go home, whatever it was. I arrived home mid-morning, hoping to avoid the drama at least a little. Bonnie and Jules were sitting on the couch when I walked in the door. Bonnie jumped to her feet and would have rushed over to me, but Jules held her back. "Bonnie, remember what we talked about?" It must have been one hell of a conversation because she stopped instantly. I almost grinned. "Hi, Jules." Then I looked at my wife and simply said her name. "Bonnie." She sat back down and looked at me with hope in her voice. "Can we talk about this?" "Why? We discussed it to death before everything fell into place. At the end, you basically told me to stop whining because it's going to happen whether I like it or not. That sounds a lot like a unilateral decision to me. Why should you be upset if I made the decision to spend time as far away from you as possible? It's an open marriage now, isn't it?" I spoke again before she could begin. "Before we go any further, did you spend the evening with Will? I saw Grace at the airport when I left, and I find it hard to believe it's a coincidence. If she was there, that asshole must have been lurking nearby." Jules spoke for the first time. They were there. We didn't know they were coming. Well, except for Booger. Will got mugged at the airport and had his wallet stolen. You don't know anything about that, do you? So Will hadn't seen me. Of course, I came up behind him and caught him off guard, so he probably wasn't sure it was me. Probably when Grace told him she'd seen me, he figured it was probably me. I carefully kept a blank expression on my face. Was he mugged? I hope it hurt like hell. Broken bones, lacerations, bruises. Does his magic stick still work? Before you answered, did you spend the evening with him? No. Why not? Because I promised you. And then she grinned for the first time. Besides, even if I wanted to, which I didn't, the mugger kicked his balls off a couple times. He was sitting with an ice pack on his balls the whole time. My heart bleeds for him. Maybe we can replay this so I can get a better understanding of what happened to him. But it doesn't matter right now. I told you how I felt. You told me to clean up the sand, and you did what you wanted to do anyway. What kind of relationship can we have going forward? I don't see a happy ending here. She was clearly rehearsing her speech. I could see that Jules was behind it. I made a mistake, you know. I thought your love for me was so strong that you'd let me fantasize for a while, and then we'd go back to normal. Guess I missed, huh? Come back to me, sweetheart, and I'll spend the rest of my life showing you how much I love you. So it's no big deal? I don't think so. I can never look Booger and John in the eye knowing they spent the evening with my wife. Booger would be unbearable, and I don't give a shit about John. I bet he can't wait to eat a cream pie, can you? The truth is, I've lost not only my wife, but a whole bunch of people I thought were my friends. To hell with every one of them. I'll never speak to them again, and if I catch Booger, I intend to instill in him that he should stay as far away from me as possible, and never tell a soul what happened. I never thought I'd be starting over at 46, but what is, is. At least I can look at myself in the morning knowing that I never betrayed my wife. Bonnie was growing paler and paler. I never betrayed you. You agreed to it yourself. I sighed. She would never admit that what she did was hurtful and damaging to our marriage, and I would never forgive her disrespect. Maybe it was at first, but before anyone made love to a person other than their spouse, I told you I couldn't do it, and I really didn't want you to do it. Begged is the correct way to put it. Not only did you tell me you were going to go through with it anyway, but you stated that you were tired of living a life of quiet desperation, and compared our life together to a slow strangulation, and that you wanted to feel alive again, blah blah blah, and so on and so forth. I think you decided your marriage was worth your adventure and just unsubscribed. Forgive me if I got the wrong impression. No, it's not like that at all. That's right. I came here with the hope of trying to salvage some kind of relationship with you for the sake of our children. But you know what? They're grown women, and they know that life doesn't always work out the way they'd like it to. I'm going to take some of my clothes and some necessary tools and leave you. I would hate to drive you to despair or feel suffocated. You should be happy to be free, Bonnie. Think of how many unused husbands there are out there available right now. You're hot for your age, so it won't take you long to make an acquaintance. Or maybe you'll want to explore your liberated lifestyle a little more before you find Mr. Excitement. In the best of all worlds, he'll turn out to be a swinger, and you'll be able to lead a fulfilling life. I'm done talking. Finished means completely finished. Do not attempt to contact me unless it is business related. The emotions playing on her face were interesting to watch. Jules was looking at me with her mouth open, so I'm sure she wasn't expecting it either. Finally, Bonnie exploded. No, that's not what I want. It's not that at all. This was supposed to be an adventure, something we could share and look back on. This wasn't supposed to be our end. I'm sorry you took it so badly, and I want more than anything for things to be the way they were before, or even better. How can I do that? Well, you can find out if Mr. Peabody will let you borrow his car to go back. Go back about 6 months and never bring it up in any of our conversations. Either way, you can't cancel the call. The deed is done, and now you don't have to feel remorse. You wanted it. You got it. Even after I explained to you what could happen if you did. Now I'm done. Please let me pack my things in peace. Bonnie wanted to object, but Jules pulled her into the kitchen. It was all in a whisper, but I could tell that the exchange was pretty heated. 5 minutes later, Jules found me in the bedroom. She's not doing well in her head right now. I couldn't help but smirk. Tell you what, Jules, why don't you spend about an hour inside my head and see what kind of shit I'm in? A year ago, I had a happy marriage and a brilliant future. Now all I have is a woman who was married to me, wondering why I can't understand her need to be with other men, and a group of people who I thought were friends, but who actually turned out to be a bunch of traitorous assholes willing to lie and go to any means necessary to get their way. She asked in a very thin voice where she stood. The jury is still out, Jules. I have to believe that you were at least partially involved in the planning of this adventure and should have known how I would feel about it, but you pushed on anyway. Tell me, did you get what you wanted out of your adventure? Her shuddering sigh sounded as if it came from the depths of her soul. No, absolutely not. It didn't turn out the way I'd hoped. What exactly did you want, Jules? Does it make any difference? Let's get back to your wife. And she's your wife. Yes, she's brain dead. Yes, we could have pushed her. And yes, she should have stopped when you told her how you felt. She did it because she wanted to. But she did it with the expectation that when it was over, you would be fine. It's starting to dawn on her that she made a really bad decision, and she's desperate to find a way back. We can never go back. Suppose we stay together, put this behind us, and she gets the urge again? She'll be smart enough not to say anything, but if the desire gets too strong, what then? We're not watching each other 24/7. She has a job that requires her to get out of the office 3 or 4 times a week. I'm constantly on the move. You think I won't be interested in what she does at work? Or what really happens when she gets together with the same women for a bachelorette party? As far as I know, that means, let's get together and do each other's brains out. Poor old Grunt will never know. Now I'm wondering what she did in the months leading up to it. You can tell me the truth, Jules. Was she with someone before our vacation? Don't embellish anything, and if you lie and I find out, that will be the last time I talk to you. She never cheated on you, Jimmy. Not that I know of. I'll admit, there were times when you weren't around that the group would indulge in a little touching, a little kissing, but Jen and I usually put a stop to it. Bonnie didn't try to stop him? She blushed. No, but she didn't encourage it. Nothing serious happened, I promise you. Group groping? Extensive kissing? Does that sound like the actions of a happily married woman? Go away, Jules. I think you've enlightened me enough, and I thank you for your candor. She tried to speak a few more times, but then she gave up and left. They were sitting at the kitchen table with tear stains on them. They looked up, and I just nodded. I was about to head out the door when Bonnie started yelling about how she was sorry and it wouldn't happen again. The problem was that I didn't think she was sorry for doing it, but for making such a mess. I firmly believed she would do it again in the future. It would be her new buddy's problem, because I didn't care anymore. I moved into a house that we were almost finished remodeling. It was a cute 2-bedroom house, and I chose it because of the large outbuilding that came with it. I planned to move all my woodworking tools there so I could have a workshop again, shaping objects of functional beauty out of wood, or sometimes just beauty for beauty's sake, helped me relax. I didn't file for divorce, because I just didn't want to admit that my marriage had failed because she no longer missed me. I knew that eventually she would give up, or I would get tired of it all and pull the trigger. We still communicated regularly. It was necessary for the survival of our business. It didn't take long for our employees to recognize that we weren't living together, and that Bonnie was a taboo subject for me. One woman refused to leave it alone, lecturing me that I should man up and decide what's between us every time I was near her. I politely asked her several times to leave it alone and get on with things, but she refused. I got tired of it and solved the problem. She was a subcontractor, a really great finisher. Her lover was her partner. When the job she was working on ended, I just didn't use her anymore. She called a few times until I blocked her number, and then her partner showed up. I always liked her, so I let her talk. "Why don't you want to use us anymore?" I grinned. "I can't afford you." She was confused. "What do you mean? We charge a little more than our competitors, but the quality of our work is better, and we're damn fast. Up until now, you've always liked us. What's changed?" When I said I couldn't afford you, I didn't mean financially. You guys do a great job, Hester, but Charlotte doesn't know when to stay out of other people's business. I mean, every time I talk to her, she's like a broken record. She has no idea what's going on between me and my wife, but she's sure that everything that's happened is my fault and I need to get over it. The price I was talking about was my health. Every time I find myself around her, my blood pressure goes up. My doctor says I need to avoid stressful situations if possible, and she was stressing me out, so she had to leave. You are going to be fine. You are some of the best I have ever seen at what you do, and people will be lining up to hire you. Honestly, I'm going to miss you. She thought about my words for a moment, then suggested, "What if we do it this way? You will deal with me. Hester will be ordered not to talk to you at all. I promise she will behave, and if she doesn't, you leave us right now." "It won't work, and you know it. She'll simmer and sulk, and then it'll all come out. Let's just keep the drama going." Hester grinned back. "I love the drama. Seriously, I'll put a muzzle on her if I have to. We've already had several discussions about how she should mind her own business and not other people's. I'm as tired of it as you are. Give us another chance." Their work was exceptional, and I really didn't like the crew I was using in their place, so I agreed, but on the condition that if Charlotte started working again, I would fire them on the spot. It was 2 weeks before I saw them again at one of my workplaces. It just so happened that Jen was with me. She liked the house I let her stay in, and Jules had signed a lease with her. I told her about Hester one afternoon while Jules and I were doing the paperwork on the house. This was to help her credit, so she could eventually buy it. Turns out, Booger wasn't exactly paying his bills. She saw my truck and stopped to say hello, hugging me tightly. I saw Charlotte's eyes widen, and I grinned. Jen noticed the look. "Is that her?" "Yes, it is." "Well then, let's give her something to think about." For the next 20 minutes, she hung on me like wallpaper, rubbing my arm and giggling stupidly at everything I said. When I walked her to her car, she surprised me by grabbing my head and kissing me hard. I turned bright red, and she giggled. "The contract still stands, Jimmy. Once you and Bonnie resolve your issues, and if you become a free agent, I'll be first in line. Promise me." I shocked her with an answering kiss. "I make a solemn vow to you. You've already interrupted enough today. Now get out." I slapped her ass lightly, making her jump up. Her grin was huge as she pulled away. I looked up and saw Charlotte watching me and smirked. She blushed about 8 shades of red and started toward me, but Hester grabbed her arm and held her back. Sure enough, she called Bonnie almost immediately. I looked into the office and she had a strange look in her eyes. "So, you and Jenny?" No, Jenny and I. She saw my truck and came by to say hello. Her antics were just to pull Hester's chain. But if there's me and Jenny, how can you object? How many lovers do you have now?" No man has touched me since that weekend." "Why? Now that you've tasted other people's men, I figured you'd be visiting the buffet every weekend. I hear the meat market is just crawling with people trying to get laid." The bar wasn't actually called the meat market, but that's what everyone called it. It was the place in town where people went if they wanted one without commitment. Needless to say, it was very popular with the young people. Tuesdays were cougar night, although they called it something else. Older women came to the bar looking for younger men to fulfill their needs. Young guys came here just for that. although some of them were always on the lookout for a sugar mama. I don't like that kind of thing. I just wanted to experience it. Just physical satisfaction without any emotional attachment. You don't understand, do you? There was an emotional attachment. You schemed and conspired with people who were supposed to be our friends, played behind my back, even though you weren't actually doing it with them. How many times, when we were lying in bed before that weekend, did you imagine one of the guys in the band lying on top of you instead of me? Bonnie blushed, but didn't deny it. It was supposed to be a grand adventure, you know? Each of us was supposed to experience something. Me for the first time, you to add to your memories. In retrospect, I should have left the sleeping dogs lying down, but I was overcome with excitement. If I had known how much this was hurting you, I probably would have stopped before things got out of hand. And I'm really, really sorry that I hurt you so much. It sounds like you want honesty, so I'm just going to say it. After much thought, I realized that I didn't regret going through with it. I needed it to boost my self-esteem, to feel desirable again. You have no idea how much I wanted you to make love to me, to reaffirm our love for each other. But you won't, and my bed is getting lonely. You have to step up, Jimmy. I took a deep breath. Let's summarize, okay? You're sorry you hurt me. You're not sorry that you decided to pursue this outside of marriage with multiple partners. And you just told me that you can't wait to show me what you've learned, and if I don't agree, you'll show it to someone else. Did I get that right? I finally pissed her off. That's not what I said at all, just that I'm sorry I hurt you. I did it and I'll never do anything like that again. It's time for you to forget about your pity party and come back to me. And I swear, if you don't come to your senses soon, someone else will show up. There it was, the straw that broke the camel's back. I didn't say a word, not even when she followed me to my truck, screaming and cursing. I managed to get inside and lock the doors before she could get to me. That pissed her off, and she stood in front of the truck, blocking my parking space. Not for the first time, I appreciated the all-wheel drive option that allowed me to shift into it at the touch of a button. I started the engine while she stood there smirking. Her eyes widened as I stepped on the gas and she dived to the side. I moved through the landscaping and overtook her car and then disappeared. 3 hours later, the cops swooped in on me. It helped that I knew them both, and when they asked if I'd tried to run over my wife, I grinned. Only in my imagination. She was standing in the parking lot, and you can tell by the ripped-out bushes that I wasn't anywhere near her when I drove away. Did you damage her car? Yes, it is. But I damaged it on private property, and I'm not going to turn it in on the insurance. And it's our car. Both our names are on the title. Is it against the law to damage something you own on property you own? There was a lengthy phone conversation, but according to law enforcement, nothing illegal happened. I called the dealership, asked them to rent a car and take it to the body shop. The papers were handed in a week later. I made sure I wasn't anywhere in the neighborhood, so that when Bonnie arrived in full force, she had no one to refer to but herself and Jules. I knew I'd have to confront her, but I wanted it to be on my terms. But it was still an unpleasant experience. I made sure I had witnesses, thinking it would make the case more reasonable. As usual, I was wrong. First, she tried crying, and when that didn't work, she turned to fighting. There will be no divorce, never. It's not what I wanted when it started, and it's certainly not what I want now. Get your head out of your ass, Jimmy. Admit you love me, and we can get this over with. May I, Bonnie? You went behind my back for at least 6 months plotting and weaving plots to make this happen? Went along with it when I begged you not to. And for 4 months, you were a broken record. I did it. Get over it. Let's go back to what we had. For almost a year, all I've heard about is what Bonnie wants. When exactly did you stop thinking about what I might want? You've turned into an incredibly selfish person, Bonnie, who I don't want to live with. What if in 6 months you decide you need variety and want to live as a cuckold? We had a good time, Bonnie. Let's try to remember the good times and move on. Might as well have been talking to the carpet. After half an hour, I gave up and left. Jules was our witness and showed up about 2 hours later. Are you really going to divorce her? Jules, what would you do if you got married and he did what Bonnie did? That is, if you didn't approve? Her sigh said it all. I warned her that night on the beach. She wouldn't listen. Said I was only saying that because you were gone and I didn't have a chance at you. Is there any truth to that? Maybe a little bit. You were the best lover I ever had, Grunt. I've often thought I should have made a little effort to keep you. Instead, I gave you to my sister on a silver platter. Well, that was surprising. You didn't say anything, Jules. I'd settle in with you in a minute, and you knew it. You were the one who wanted to keep your freedom. Don't get me wrong, because I didn't just settle on Bonnie. I fell in love with her on the 5th date, but I wasn't really interested in her until you said you weren't even close to ready to settle down. She sighed. Don't you think I realized it too late? We can't rewrite the past, honey. If we could, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I'm only here because I promised to talk to you. I can't pretend to know what's going on in her head. If I were to speculate, I'd say she's experiencing buyer's remorse, but what she bought doesn't involve returns. Besides, if she's honest, she knows she made a mistake. Her belief that you love her enough to tolerate anything has backfired on her, and now she doesn't know how to deal with it. Don't expect the divorce to go smoothly. She will fight you every step of the way. I wish she wouldn't do that, Jules. Put it this way. All it's going to lead to is more lawyer bills. And eventually she'll run out of options, and it's going to happen anyway. Ask her to be polite and short. She stood up and kissed my cheek. I will, but it won't change anything. I'm sorry, honey, for ruining your marriage. Not as sorry as I am. Thanks for the apology, though. She walked away, tears streaming down her cheek. Hello, dear viewer. This is the end of this wonderful chapter, and I want to remind you that the full story is on our Patreon. And by the way, there aren't many seats left. As the narrator of this compelling story, I couldn't help but feel the gravity of the emotional struggle Jimmy finds himself in and the complex relationships surrounding him. The story unfolds with a mixture of betrayal, heartache, and the struggle for individual freedom in a crumbling marriage. In this part of our narrative, we witness Jimmy's decision to distance himself from the chaos that had become his marriage. Raw emotions poured out as he confronted Bonnie, exposing the cracks in their relationship. Finding solitude in the mountains and on the houseboat became a desperate attempt to escape a painful reality. Now, as we delve into the aftermath of the separation, we see Jimmy trying to rebuild his life. The dynamic with Bonnie remains tense, and their attempted divorce becomes a battleground of conflicting emotions. Bonnie, torn between remorse and a desire for reconciliation, struggles to accept the consequences of her choices. Tensions rise when Jimmy takes drastic steps to emphasize his independence. His encounter with Hester and Charlotte at the construction site adds irony and humor to the narrative. The dramatic confrontation between Jimmy and Bonnie during their divorce reveals the deep wounds and irreparable damage to their relationship. As we prepare for the next installment of this fascinating saga, I invite you to join me on a journey of self-discovery, healing, and the unpredictable twists and turns that life has in store for our protagonist. The emotional ride is not over, and the decisions made in the following chapters will shape the characters' destinies. If you're ready for more details, once again, I remind you that an uncensored version of this story is waiting for you on our Patreon. Join us as we explore the complexities of love, betrayal, and the pursuit of happiness in the turbulent waters of relationships. Until next time, get ready for the next chapter in this turbulent story of Jimmy's life.